Hello again. Samuel Andrews, Christianity and Anti-Christianity and Their Final Conflict. This short chapter is the deification of humanity. In our examination of the words of St. Paul, 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 4, where he speaks of the man of sin as sitting in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, and claiming divine honor, we found reason to believe that the apostle did not speak of a deification like that of the Roman emperors, but of one far higher and resting upon a very different ground. This point we shall now consider in the light of what has been said of the current philosophical pantheism and its influence upon the religious movements of our time. In our examination of the tendencies of modern philosophy, we have seen that all tend to deify man. As all roads were said of old to lead to Rome, so all present movements, social, political, religious, find their center in humanity. Philosophy teaches man that he is divine, and he is quite ready to believe it and to act accordingly. Science, which shows the greatness of the universe and which should teach him humility, only enlarges his conception of the greatness of the intellect, which is able thus to search out nature's mysteries. What eulogiums are daily pronounced upon the dignity and excellence of humanity, and what unbounded possibilities of development are before it. If science is able now to explain in large measure the universe, its origin, its laws, its evolution, what limit can be set to future possible discoveries? Keep in mind this is written right at the end of the 19th century, over 120 years ago. If philosophy is competent to solve the problem of the divine existence and reconstruct the Godhead in thought and define the law of its being, this itself gives proof of man's potential divinity. It is upon the consciousness of this divinity that the religion of the future must be founded. The great obstacles to these tendencies to deify humanity lie in the facts of the creation of man with limited and defined powers, and of the incarnation as given in the creeds and held by the Church. Of creation we shall have another occasion to speak. As regards the incarnation, it is obvious that so long as the absolute distinction between Christ and other men is held, his two natures in one person, no man affirming that he is God can be received by the Church. But this dualism of the two natures in one person, which the Church does not attempt to reconcile, but accepts as a reality in Jesus Christ, is offensive to the philosophical pride which is not content till it has reduced all things to unity. It is willing, as we have already seen, to admit that he is divine if all men are equally divine. If we may say that God is incarnate in all as in him, or that all partake of the divine human element manifested in the Son, then all are alike the sons of God, and the distinction of Jesus Christ is made one of degree, not of kind. These two forms of neo-Christianity, although differing widely as to the person of Christ, agree in the result that man is essentially one with God. In the first, Christ is divine, not as the eternally pre-existing Son of God made man by his birth of the Virgin, but as simply man through the immanence of God in him. God being immanent in all men, all are divine in the same sense in which he was divine. In the second, we have in the Son an eternal archetypal man, of whose divine humanity we are partakers, and are thus brought into unity with deity. We are, as said by one, consubstantial with him, and so consubstantial with God. It is the deposition of the Lord from his place as the one incarnate Son through the assertion of the incarnation of God in the race, which removes the first great obstacle in the way of the reception of the Antichrist. For it is as the representative of our common divine humanity that he will demand the homage of the world. By a belief in a general incarnation, as affirmed by one school of the neo-Christians, Christ is no more God-man as to his nature than all are God-men. If one may suppose this belief to have spread widely in Christendom, the questions must arise. To whom, as the best representative of our divine humanity, shall men pay their homage? To one who lived many centuries ago, when humanity was comparatively undeveloped, or to one of our own day, the product of its highest culture. Why, it is now asked by not a few, should Jesus of Nazareth stand forever as the great example of the Incarnation? Can we affirm that the fullness of our divinity has been realized in any one man, or at any past time? Are we not rather to expect a higher realization of it in someone to come? If humanity is under the law of dynamic evolution, or if a divine principle is ever developing itself in men, must there not be a continual upward religious progress? We cannot therefore believe that a man of the distant past is to be regarded as the final term of man's evolution or the highest manifestation of God. Whether Christ or another will hold the higher place as the divine man is a matter which time only can decide. But the strong presumption is that we are to look forward rather than backward, and that it is unreasonable to regard any religious or moral type of the past as perfect and unsurpassable. It is also to be remembered that in rendering homage to one who appears as the rival of Christ, men will not do homage to one who differs in his nature from themselves and superior to them, but to their own nature as embodied in him. In exalting him, they exalt themselves. Yet the community of nature does not forbid that they recognize in him one in whom is a larger measure of divinity, and so capable of taking the place of a supreme religious leader. While distinguished above others, yet he is in closest sympathy with them. He is not, like the Christ of the Church, a superhuman being coming down from heaven and returning thither, but a true Son of Man. Nor does he stand in special relations to a few, as does the head of the Church, but is the representative of universal humanity. It is indeed hard for many reared from childhood under the influence of the Christian faith, but now accepting, more or less clearly, the pantheistic theory of God's continuous self-development in humanity, or of its continuous evolution, to set Christ aside as its highest realization, and to believe that anyone higher than he can come. Yet this logical conclusion is more and more forcing its way and demanding assent. Of this we may see many signs. The time may not be far distant when multitudes will say what a few now affirm. It is a dishonor done to human nature to teach that in any man of the past it has reached its culmination. The path of humanity is upward and onward. The divine element in it will manifest itself more and more, and we may not go back 18 centuries to find the ideal man. Of the growing depreciation of Christ and his rejection as the ideal which we of today are to reverence and imitate, some proofs will be given later. As illustrative of the present tendencies to deify humanity and thus deny the special place of Christ, we give some extracts from representative writers, showing how rapidly these are preparing men's minds to receive the coming Antichrist. We begin with some writers who best represent logical Hegelian pantheism, and first with Strauss, taking the translations from Mill's mythical interpretation. Quoting Strauss now, "The infinite spirit is alone actual when he shuts himself up in finite spirits. The union of the divine and human natures is real in an infinitely higher sense when I apprehend the whole of humanity as its subject of operation than when I set apart a particular man as such. Is not the incarnation of God from eternity a truer thing than one in an exclusive point of time? Taken as residing in an individual God-man, the properties and functions which the church doctrine ascribes to the Christ are inconsistent and self-contradictory. But in the idea of the race of men, they harmonize together. Humanity is the union of both natures. It is God made man, the infinite manifesting itself in the finite. Humanity is the miracle worker. It is the sinless one. It is that which dies and rises again and ascends towards heaven. Through faith in this Christ, and especially in his death and resurrection, is man justified before God. A dogmatic theology which, in handling the topic of Christ, rests in him as an individual is not dogmatic theology, but a sermon." Of course, from the standpoint of orthodoxy, this is outright blasphemy, but it's right there in surviving in Strauss and many others in that era, the latter part of the Victorian era. Put in a link to J.W.'s misrepresenting famous Bible scholar William Barclay. Why did they misrepresent him? Did he really believe, as was more than hinted in many uses of Barclay by the J.W.'s, did he really believe that Christ was a created angel? I'll also put in a link to our John playlist. In that playlist you'll find the complete book, The Divinity of Christ in the Gospel of John, by no less an authority than the great Greek grammarian A.T. Robertson. See you next time.